What's up, everybody? BD here at LA Comic-Con, joined by an absolute legend.
Oh, thank you.
Marc Guggenheim. Thank you for hanging out with me on the channel and talking about some of your incredible work. It's laid out on the table, by the way, which is how I actually, for the first time today, somehow learned. I didn't know you were on Flash Forward.
Yeah, for the first half of the season.
If I'm honest,
Yeah.
I didn't finish Flash Forward. So I watched your work, and then...
Well, I'm sure that there's no connection with you stopping watching the show when I got fired from it.
It could be related.
Yeah.
Okay, but also, of course, the Arrowverse. I mean, comics, we're going to talk about all this stuff, but the Arrowverse is like something that I think changed my life and a lot of people's lives, and I assume yours too.
It really did, actually. It really, really did.
Yeah. So I'd like to go to the beginning of that.
Yeah.
Because at the time, we had like Smallville and some comic book shows, superhero shows, but not a whole lot. There wasn't like the boom yet.
No.
You guys were really the first to do this shared universe thing on TV. Do you remember like what it was like? Was it easier at the beginning or like harder to get started?
It was so hard. It was like that year, that first season of Arrow was the hardest season of my career. And in large part it was because we didn't realize at the time, but we were trying to do television kind of for a superhero television for a new era. And there were a lot of things that David Nutter established in the pilot that really were groundbreaking. The action, the scope, the camera work. And to do all that on a network schedule and a network budget, no one had ever done that before. So there was no playbook for us to copy off of. And episodes 2 through 8, so a huge chunk of season 1, all those episodes required reshoots. And that is not like, it's not like features where you build in reshoots into the process. Like, oh my God, that's a huge, big deal to have to do that in addition to our regular shooting schedule and everything. When we watched episode 9, which was the mid-season finale of season 1, Greg Berlanti and I turned to each other and we were like, oh, thank God we don't have to do reshoots. Like, we were just thrilled to get to that step. That
would be like recording an interview, not having good audio.
That would never happen.
And coming back and doing it again. No, but that's cool that you guys hit that rhythm with episode 9 and then just kind of kept running.
Just kept going. And then each episode, like, there are certain episodes in season 1 that I can sort of point to that as going like, okay, we raised our game, we figured something out. Yeah. Like, there was episode 9, then there was episode 11, then there's like episode, I think it was like 16 or 18, and then 22 and 23, where we just felt like we were we weren't just getting by without reshoots, we were actually raising our game up.
Just getting more comfortable hitting that rhythm. Yeah, that's cool. It's also like following Flash Forward, which followed one of my favorite shows, Lost. I feel like, which just turned 20, by the way.
I know, I feel so old.
It's insane. But look, with Smallville having been one of the few comic book shows before the Arrowverse, like, what were some of the influences you found that kind of you used to apply to building out the universe starting with Arrow?
Well, certainly in terms of comics, it was Mike Grell's Longbow Hunters and Andy Diggle and Jock's Green Arrow year 1. Yeah. In terms of shows, Lost actually was a huge influence, in part also because, I had this experience on Flash Forward where I always say Lost wore out our welcome. After Lost, people just were impatient. They didn't want to wait 6 seasons or 7 seasons to get answers. They wanted answers immediately. So, like, on Arrow Season 1, we just burned through story at, what I say, a reckless pace, in part because that was a reaction to, how the audience was feeling after Lost, and also because Greg Berlanti and I had done another show called Eli Stone where we were always on the verge of getting canceled. So because of that, we didn't wait for we were like, you can't wait till season 2 because there might not be a season 2. You can't wait till season 3 because there might not be a season 3. So it's like you got to do it now. So you just keep turning cards over.
We were talking earlier, you were telling me how when you were doing Eli Stone, Lost was...
So
such a cool story.
We inherited... So there were 2 office complexes next to each other on the Disney lot. And when Alias ended, Lost moved over to their offices. Yeah. And we on Eli Stone came into their offices. So we inherited the Lost offices. And at the beginning of the season, we had to basically pitch out the first 6 episodes of season 1. So what we did was we got a ruler and got one of the whiteboards and made 6 columns and wrote very carefully. And then we called up maintenance to take the whiteboard off the wall so we can march it over to ABC and pitch off the board. And apparently, when they cleaned the lost offices, rather than erasing the whiteboards, they just flipped them over. So when we took down this board, on the back was the Rosetta Stone for season 1 of Lost. So it was things like Lock Can Walk and Sun Knows English. And we were like, one of my biggest all-time regrets is I never took a picture of it. Because it was like a bit, I would
have walked out with it. I didn't
realize.
I didn't even see this. Oops, it's my...
Well, this was still very early on in the life of Lost.
Right.
So we didn't realize that we were basically looking at television history.
That's insane. Yeah, wow, that's crazy.
Yeah.
And okay, so then I feel like one of the first times Arrow really shocked me was when the first time we thought Oliver Queen was dead. When Raish kicked him, like really thought he was dead. When you guys did that, like, I don't know, I can't really think of it. I'm sure there were other moments, even probably in Lost, which we just talked about, where something similar happened. And I remember like Glenn in The Walking Dead, but that hadn't happened yet.
Yeah.
When you guys threw Stephen Amell off a cliff, did you feel like that was a risk? Was that a bit scary to do, to try to make the audience think you killed the main character?
But no, I mean, yes and no, in the sense that it probably was a risk, but we didn't look at it that way. Yeah. We look at it as, we never like made decisions on, is this risky, is this not risky, do it, don't do it based on that. Instead, for us, it was, is this cool? Is this something, like, if we were fans of the show, as we tried to think of ourselves as, what would we find interesting?
Yeah.
And what we really were after was not 309, where Oliver falls off the mountain. For us, it was all about episode 310, because 309 was our mid-season finale. We wanted to open the second half of season 3 and make the audience think for an hour that, oh my God, they actually did it. Oliver's dead. So
and
for
make
us,
Stephen read a script where he's like, I'm out.
We gave him the heads up. We gave him the heads up. You know, and then there's obviously like people on Twitter who weren't helpful, like basically saying like this was like a shot across the bow, or like trying to prove that we could do the show without Stephen. No, it was just simply, we thought it'd be a big, mind fuck, if I can believe that fuck. We thought it would just be a really big mind fuck if people come in to watch episode 10 and Steven's not in it. Like, that would just be,
it's a ballsy move. It's a ballsy move. It's awesome. It's cool.
So it was fun. So I think looking back, there were things that we did that were very risky or were very ballsy.
Yeah.
But we weren't really thinking in those terms. We were thinking just in the terms of what's cool, I mean, introducing Grant and doing a shared universe on television, like, I don't know if you see that. I don't know if that's a risk is the word, but it's kind of like a gamble. Did that feel like an added pressure to have multiple successful shows, or was it like, okay, well, we'll try Flash, see how far it goes? And no, I think the biggest gamble that was taken was Greg's decision to cast Grant, because of Ezra Miller. We all now think of Barry as a skinny, brunette, neurotic, dork. But if you remember, prior to Ezra Miller, prior to Grant Gustin, Barry was a blonde-haired, blue-eyed, like, he looked like a jock. Yes, he was a police scientist, but he was cool and jacked. Yeah. So Greg's decision to actually go in a completely different way with the character of Barry Allen, I think that was the biggest risk.
How would things that were happening in movies, whether it was like Ezra and that stuff, how would things that were happening in the movies or planned to happen, which may have never ended up happening, affect what you may or may not have been able to do on television?
So basically the way we had it arranged with DC Entertainment was we would have a plan for, like, we're going to use a certain character or a group of characters, and they would give us the thumbs up or thumbs down.
Okay.
And sometimes it would change. So, like you'll notice, if you look over the run of Arrow, over 8 years, Slade Wilson is in and out of the show. Mm-hmm. He's in, and that's because there were some times when there was a Slade Wilson movie in development, and there were times when there wasn't.
Yeah.
So, depending upon what was happening on the feature side of things, that would either open or close certain doors for us.
I find it so interesting that, like, the main heroes can coexist. Like, you can have the Flash on both, but you can't have Deathstroke in both. I don't know how that works.
I mean, look, honestly, like, the funny thing is, there is absolutely a glasses half empty way of looking at that. Where, and it could drive you crazy.
Yeah, right.
I always chose to look at the glasses more than half full, because it wasn't about, for me, the characters they said no to. It was all the characters they said yes
which was
to.
a lot. I mean, Crisis, like you guys got to Crisis
a huge amount. Like,
with
many more than I ever expected.
I mean, yeah, between the villains and the heroes that appear in the Arrowverse, the main characters and the supporting characters that come and go. I mean, the boxes you checked as a comic fan, I'm sure, is just a dream because you got to Crisis. Dude.
I gotta give props to Jim Lee. You know, it felt when we were doing Crisis, it felt like not all the time, but with a lot of things, I felt like we were swimming upstream. That we were just, you know, that we didn't have a lot of, you know, people saying yes, go do that.
Yeah.
And Jim was like that one lone voice saying, yes, go do that. Like, and that was really, really great. And it was just nice. I needed that sort of wind at my back as we were going through this.
Bet, man. And there's nowadays there's a lot of conversation because Marvel, DC, I mean, Image Comics has thing on Amazon, and they're making movies. Like superheroes are everywhere, and there is of course the conversation of superhero fatigue. And some movies aren't performed. Like Marvel movies aren't a layup of $1 billion as they used to be. Like, what are your thoughts on kind of the current stance of superheroes on movies and television and in live action?
I don't think there's superhero fatigue. I think there's bad movie fatigue. I think, you know, just it's very look at Wolverine, look at Deadpool Wolverine.
Super fun movie.
Like super fun movie, really great, made $1 billion. There's clearly not superhero fatigue. What it is the days of a bad superhero movie doing $1 billion, those days are over.
I mean, Iron Man 2 was a big success. And I love Iron Man, but...
No, exactly. You know, like, I mean, there are some really, really bad, you know,
Sure.
I co-wrote the critically acclaimed Academy Award nominated Green Lantern movie. I know there's some really bad superhero movies out there. And some really overperformed. We're just now in a place where that overperforming doesn't happen. And the truth is, I actually think that's probably the best thing for superhero movies as a genre.
Yeah. I found there was just recently the article that was like I think it's Disney that's gonna like interview people about what they like and don't like. I saw
that article. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, by the way, if that were to happen, and I tweet about this, if that were to happen, that would be like the beginning of the end of the creative process.
If you let the fans kind of have the...
Yeah, I mean, look, I love the fans. I always say there's no shows, there's none of these movies without the fans.
Right.
But, you know, Stan Lee, I think, said it best. Give the fans what they need, not what they want. Mm-hmm. And, you know, it's... as it is, there's a whole group of fandom who already thinks they're in charge, you know, and like
we're on the same Twitter, huh?
Well, yeah, pretty much. And it's like, I mean, it's like, guys, I like on Arrow, for example, we were always asked like, oh, you did this in reaction to that, and I'm like, do you understand how television works? Like, especially network television, we are so far ahead of you.
Yeah,
we are so far ahead of Twitter that. Like, even if we wanted to respond to the online feedback, we couldn't. We have a tanker, oil tanker that we are trying to slowly turn.
Yeah,
it's impossible to react.
How would you get feedback? Like, how was it fans? Was it like what? How would you know what was working to make sure you were doing things before people would see?
Honestly, it was us, the studio, and the network.
Yeah,
that was the audience. You know,
it's kind of scary.
It's scary, but honestly, like. In a lot of ways, it's very empowering and exciting because what you get to do, and this is different from like streaming where you're basically, you know, you're shooting scripts that are already written. Everything's written ahead of time. What is nice about network television, the production cadence you're on, is that you get to see dailies and respond to them. Like, you know, when Dolph Lundgren was only supposed to be in 2 episodes of Arrow in season 5, but we saw his first day of dailies and we were like, oh my God, this is amazing. Let's find out how much money we have and get him for as many episodes. Like, same thing with, you know, Emily Rickards' Felicity. You know, her first day dailies on Arrow 103 were so good. We're like, we just started writing towards her.
Could you imagine now, looking back, the show? Yeah.
Well, I couldn't imagine the show without her. Number one.
Right.
Number two, we literally, if it was done the way streaming is done, we would not have known to write Felicity into more episodes because we wouldn't have seen her dailies when we, you know, were working on, you know, that show. So it's having the ability to respond to what you're seeing on, you know, from the actors is really the best thing.
So the Hawk Girl as a barista, dailies. Didn't want to see what her specialty drink was.
That was,
This is from Russ.
No, it probably was not. I will say, probably not our best hour. I will tell you, here's a true story. The original Legends was not originally Legends. Originally, the desire was, will you create a third Arrowverse show, and we were going to do Hawkman and Hawkgirl. That's why Hawkman and Hawkgirl are in season 1 of Legends. But we very quickly realized, like, how is this any different from Arrow or Flash? Because we knew we didn't want to just do a third show.
Right.
Like, Arrow is very different from Flash, and Flash is very different from Arrow. Whatever the third show was, it had to be very different from both those shows.
You did that.
So we were like, okay, we haven't done an ensemble yet. We haven't done a group, a team. Mm-hmm. So here that is. And then, of course, Legends became even more weird and different.
Yeah, it was it show was so much fun, man.
Thanks.
But I mean, the whole universe feels like an ensemble in itself. It's crazy to think it's gone because it was such a big part of our lives. In an era where nostalgia does bring things back, do you think there's a version of the timeline we're in, where there is like whether it's a reunion or some sort of revival of the Arrowverse 10, 20, 30 years from now, we see these people again ever?
I'd like to think so. I think how the shows age and whether or not people remember them and whether or not they still resonate, 10, 20 years from now is going to really dictate that. I hope. I mean, I actually like where we are right now because shows have been off the air for a while and people are still coming up to me at conventions and online and saying, I just discovered the shows.
Yeah.
So they're, this is where
cool.
streaming is good. It's allowed the shows to have a second, third, and fourth life. So
more and more eyeballs, who knows?
Yeah,
The kingdom come of the Arrowverse. I'm there.
I wouldn't mind it.
Okay, well, I wanted to. You wrote Spider-Man Brand New Day, which when Spider-Man No Way Home was coming out, that was a big conversation, big theory, and kind of when you see the movie, you're like, oh, maybe this would have some influence here. When you see moments like that, when a movie like Spider-Man No Way Home, the biggest movie of its respective year, are taking cues, maybe, from stuff you've done in comics, like how does that feel for you as a writer to see it kind of reach that level of...
I don't know any writer who doesn't love them.
Yeah.
Like, these characters and these stories are our kids, and it's like, oh, the kid went and became a movie star. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
That's really awesome.
Yeah.
It never gets tiresome. Like, I create a character for Young X-Men who ended up in Days of Future Past. I'm like, my character is living and breathing in a movie,
So cool, dude.
Like, that's pretty damn cool. I always get a thrill from it.
So what other characters or books or things that you've worked on in comics would you like to see somebody get a shot at in live action?
Well, it's not in comics, but I just published a novel called In Any Lifetime, where it's funny, all the feedback I've been getting, the reviews and whatnot, have all said this would make a really good movie. And I would actually like to see it become a movie, not for me to write, because I feel like I've told that story, but I can see what people are saying when they say this would make for a good movie, and I would like to see someone take it and make it their own.
I imagine it's got to, after so much work in television and film and all these things, it's got to be almost difficult to not... Does that sort of structure of storytelling bleed into it when you're writing?
Yeah, the thing is, it does, actually. Like, I always say, like, my 10,000 hours are in screenwriting. And not in prose writing. So as a result, like, I'll even talk about the novel. Sometimes I'll say, like, it's the movie. It's like, oh, that's just my, muscle memory. And including the fact that, like, I would have to remind myself that when I was writing the novel that I've got tools, like internal monologue and stuff, that I don't have in live action. Because it's like 10,000 hours of expertise that have to be morphed and shaped a bit when I work in prose.
Okay, very cool. Man, I'm going to let you get back to it here at LA Comic-Con, Mark. It's an absolute pleasure to speak with you. Thank you so much for hopping on the YouTube channel. And everybody at home watching, thank you for watching. Make sure you're subscribed, and we'll see you in the next video.